negotiation tonight. We are talking about negotiation tonight as a tool for dispute resolution and conflict management in a changing world. Before I go into the paper properly, let me quickly say that we are expected to take mediation first so that it can flow from that angle. But because the negotiation paper is quite much more, we may not be able to finish it tonight. It will spill into tomorrow, and whatever is left, we can finish before we commence on the mediation paper. And that's why I have chosen to start with a negotiation as a tool for dispute resolution and conflict management in a changing world. The key words that we will take note in this paper are negotiation, conflict, alternative dispute resolution, and dispute management. Having said this, let me quickly say that conflict is what we cannot avoid. It is a natural phenomenon and an unavoidable consequence of human interaction in any society as being inevitable. So when you talk about conflict, conflict is inevitable in our society. We cannot do without it. We cannot evade it. We cannot avoid it. They are bound to happen. They are bound to occur. And when they do occur, what do we do to mitigate such conflicts? And this is why we'll be looking at negotiation as one of the tools, one of the mechanisms for dispute resolution. Stott. Let me quote from Stott, Hampshire. He said, we should look into society not for consensus, but for ineliminable and acceptable conflicts, and for rationally controlled hostilities as the normal condition for mankind. Harmony and inner consensus come with them. This is a very, very powerful statement. Very powerful statement. To enable us, come to a clear understanding that in all our society, we cannot avoid conflict. Conflict are bound to happen. Conflict are bound to happen. Consensus is not possible in our lives. We cannot all agree all of the time. But what do we look into? Acceptable conflicts and a way to control conflicts are bound to happen in our lives. When they happen, what do? We should look for ways to resolve such conflicts without much ado. Conflict is inevitable in a social order. Human beings have the ability to think rationally, hence resulting into having different ideas, beliefs, values, needs, and goals. And because of all of this, our values may be different, our goals may be different, our needs may be different, our beliefs are certainly different. And when we realize this, we should accept that they are bound to happen conflicts in all of this. So therefore, conflicts are inevitable in our lives. When they happen, we must look for solutions. Ultimately, it is impossible for people from different backgrounds to work together, make decisions without having conflicts. John Dutton is of the view that conflict is generic. It's a generic phenomenon that knows no system boundaries. You see, conflicts are built into us. Conflicts are built into our system. So when they happen, we must accept it as one of the ways of our lives. Because we cannot do without it. The society is filled with different types of beliefs, value system, needs, and goals. And these goals are bound to conflict with one another. So when they conflict, how do we resolve it? It is through one of these alternative dispute resolution, which is negotiation that we are talking about today. Managing conflict for mutual benefit moves people away from assuming that co-workers are arrogant and trustworthy to seeing them as reliable colleagues. Managing conflicts with mutual benefit moves people away from assuming that co-workers are arrogant and untrustworthy to seeing them as reliable colleagues. This is the sober. You see, in all that we do, conflict must arise. And when they do, managing it in a mutually beneficial approach is what is required from each and every one of us. It's what is required from each and every one of us. Therefore, we all know, we all accept that this mechanism of resolving conflicts are they are not really new. They are not new in our system. In our traditional African system, they are not new. We've had it in our traditional African system. However, we know that the traditional method of resolving major conflicts is through adversarial litigation, court system. We know that whenever there is conflict between parties, we want to prove who is right and who is wrong, or who should be at the receiving end. So what do? We approach the court. The court adjudicates over such conflicts. But people are now seeing that the court system is cumbersome. The court system is costly, and therefore it takes more time to resolve such conflicts. They now come up with other areas of resolving this conflict, which had always been, because in our traditional African system, we don't go to court. We go to see the king whenever there is a problem. Parties present themselves before the traditional rulers, and these traditional rulers brings us together and try to negotiate whatever is the problem between us and resolve it amicably. And we return back to different rooms, different adversaries. However, to many demerits, dispensation, complicated procedural formalities, high cost of litigation, dispute explored for other ways of resolving their dispute. These other ways are known as alternative dispute resolution processes, which are at times called alternative dispute settlement (ADS). But tonight we are not going to be talking about arbitration. We are not going to be talking about conciliation. We are not going to be talking about neutral evaluation. We are only concerned about negotiation and mediation. Like I said earlier, I'm taking the view of tonight because of the lengthy paper and ability to make us tomorrow from where we start. Now, why do we negotiate? We negotiate because there are conflicts. We negotiate because there are disputes. So, what is conflict? Conflict is the disagreement or clashes between ideas, principle, or people. It is the disagreement through which two or more parties are seen as threat to their interests, needs, or concern. According to Michael Nicholson, a conflict exists when two people wish to carry out acts which are usually inconsistent. Conflicts exist when two or more people wish to carry out acts which are usually inconsistent. They are inconsistent because they are likely to be, their beliefs are likely to be different, their goals are likely to be different, their ideas are likely to be different. And so they are inconsistent with each other. And this brings about conflict. They may both want to do the same thing, such as, eat the same apple and also, they may want to do different things where different things are mutually incompatible, such as they both want to stay together, but one wants to go to the cinema and the other to stay at home. The conflict is resolved when some mutually compatible set of actions is worked out. The definition of conflict can be extended from individuals to groups, such as states or nations, or group of individuals or establishments. And more than two parties can be involved in conflict. The principle remains the same, whether they are individuals or they are corporate bodies or states and states involved in this conflict. This definition has been largely argued to be less encompassing, owing to the fact that there are more complex relationships between humans that bring about conflict. Peter Watson sees conflict as a situation in which two or more facts that conflict can escalate. It is imperative to assert that conflict can escalate either destructively or constructively. Conflict escalating into destruction is also known as dysfunctional conflict, where the root cause of the conflict is cast aside and disputants titled or tilted towards harming each other. Dysfunctional conflicts oftentimes becomes intractable as it promotes inequality, oppression, and distrust. On the other hand, constructive conflict, otherwise known as functional conflict, is such where there is a win-win situation for the parties in conflict. It strengthens the relationships of the parties and the contentious issues are resolved. It can also lead to new alternative ideas. What are the sources of conflict? What are the sources of conflict? Conflict, which is a part of the sum total of human experience, emanates from various sources. This may include the following: conflict over resources acquisition. We all know what resource acquisition in our country has brought about in terms of conflict in Nigeria. Everybody wants to have, dominion over the resources in his own domain. So all of these things brings about conflict. Conflict over resource acquisition. This is the conflict that emanates from the need to acquire and control certain scarce resources like oil and gas, like gold, like diamond, land, and etc. Problems arise when the realization of a person's need will result into the sacrifice of another. Change is a very, very big issue that brings about conflict. People say change is inevitable, but in its inevitability, change is not possible without conflict. The mere fact that an organization changes its indoor management or a government changes its policies and laws, conflicts are bound to happen. A clear example was the government's move to remove fuel subsidy. We know what this has brought to us in recent times. It has resulted in serious conflict, which we are still, battling with right now. We saw the labor unions, the joint labor unions having to have a conversation with government, dialogue with government over the the increase in fuel subsidy or the removal of fuel subsidy and salary increment and all of that. So changes are bound to bring about conflict. Conflict over beliefs, norms, and values. Of course, religious beliefs also brings about conflict. We have, like I said earlier, human beings have different beliefs, ideas, and values in the belief of achieving a common goal. However, these differences, conflict springs up. The way a Christian will react to a particular situation will be different from the way the other religion will react in that same way. So vice versa. Hence, bringing about conflict in our beliefs. Personality brings about conflict. Personality brings about conflict. This is also known as interpersonal conflict. Oftentimes, when there is a team or a group to work with, interpersonal conflict usually arises from factors such as motivation, aspirations, etc., etc. We have seen what religious beliefs, religious ideologies have done to our political psyche, to our nation, to our economy. Religious beliefs also brings about conflict. Communication brings about conflict. Communication brings about conflict. Improper dissemination or of information and communication can lead to conflict. It creates uncertainties and lack of innovation ideas when it involves the corporate world. Where people negotiation, negotiation. I started by defining negotiation from the Chambers English Dictionary. It says negotiation is defined as to bargain. When you negotiate, you bargain to confer for the purpose of mutual agreement or to arrange for by agreement. When we negotiate, what it simply means is we bargain. We sit down to have a conference to confer with one another to bring together our ideas of how we believe it should be done or how we believe things should go. So negotiation is about bargaining. Negotiation is about having a mutual agreement between parties involved in a dispute or in a conflict. Roger Fisher defines it broadly as including all cases in which two or more parties are communicating. You see, communicating is very essential in negotiating. Communicating is very, very essential because if you don't communicate, the other party will not know what you want. You will not know what the other party also wants. So there should be a need for communication. Communication between the parties must be ad idem, each for the purpose of influencing the other's decision. Nothing seems to be gained by limiting the concept of formal negotiation taking place at a table, and much to be gained by defining the subject broadly. It is the process where two or more parties take offers, counter offers, concessions in order to reach an agreement. This is beautiful. It's like it is a process where two or more parties make offers. In negotiation, we make offers. We also make counter offers because the offer I made to you may not be acceptable to you. You also want to make a counter offer. In the process, there is a bargain. We bargain and we have to concede. So we have a concession in order to reach a mutual agreement. We negotiate every day. People don't really understand that negotiation is what we do every day of our lives. The woman in the market, the landlord tenant also negotiate. The man who wants to buy land negotiate. Every day we negotiate with ourselves without realizing it. Buying or selling whatever item or commodity, working out on the lease or on an apartment, or closing terms for purchasing a house, dealing with contractors, working on a building, etc., is negotiation. And they are all examples of a daily undertakings. Negotiation acts as a tool for structural commercial agreement to resolve conflict, managing operational problems, as well as social relationships. It is well established that the traditional method of resolving conflict is through the court process. But attention is not given to the relationship of the parties in dispute. Whenever we go take ourselves to court, whenever we approach the court to adjudicate over a conflicting issue, the court does not take into consideration our interpersonal relationship. We may be members of the same family, conflicting over an issue, probably on land. But the court will not take cognizance of our relationship in arriving at this decision. But in alternative dispute resolution, particularly in mediation and negotiation, the parties' personal relationship are taken into consideration because after the resolution of this, I was talking about the adversarial court. I had a break when I was talking about the adversarial court system. The court system, the adversarial court system, does not take the conflict, the relationship of the parties into consideration in arriving at its decision. So the conflict may be resolved in the adversarial court system. The conflict will certainly be resolved because the court will reach a decision. There will be a judgment. But the parties will be left with resentment towards each other, thereby barring any form of future dealings which may be beneficial to both of them. Negotiation, on the other hand, which is an alternative dispute resolution process, employs skills and strategies that will maintain the status quo between the parties. You see, this is the difference between alternative dispute resolution and the adversarial court system. In dispute resolution, the negotiation will take into consideration the interest of the parties, the interpersonal relationship of these parties before, coming to a decision or before resolving this dispute. Therefore, it is advised that we should negotiate out of fear. We should not be afraid to negotiate. That's a quotation from John Fitzgerald Kennedy, the former United States president. He said let us never negotiate out of fear. Let us never fear to negotiate. What this means is sometimes we want to run away from negotiation, but out of fear. It is not because negotiation will do us any evil. Rather, it will bring better understanding. Now, in the process of commencing negotiation, there are skills and strategies a negotiator would require or be acquainted with. These strategies include distributive or competitive strategy, integrative or problem-solving strategy, distributive or competitive strategy, and integrative problem-solving strategy. Now, let's talk about integrative or problem-solving strategy that we refer to as win-win strategy or win-win approach. The integrative or problem-solving strategy is referred to as a win-win strategy or a win-win approach. This is an approach adopted when the parties in dispute have tendency of engaging in future dealings. It aims at making the interest of disputants maximized, hence setting aside their individual self from the contentious issues, thus exploring various options to achieve their mutual benefit. This approach has been widely described as a win-win approach because after the conflict has been resolved, conflicting parties do not feel to have lost anything, rather to have achieved something. Rather to have achieved something. In addition, it's a fixed plan is involved in every dispute in which a party would like to take a larger share of the whole of the entire resolution. However, the application of the win-win strategy will expand the pie so as to accommodate the interests of disputants. What this means is that positional bargaining is totally avoided. A party will not stand on a position and believe that strategy is a problem. A person who depends on the popular cliché that everything is negotiable and everyone is a negotiator can become complacent where he or she applies an approach not suitable for a conflict. Yeah, I'm on, I'm on. Application of the competitive approach, that is the win-lose approach to a conflict, in which parties have potentials of having future dealings, will result into the destruction of their relationship. The competitive approach, which is a litigation-like approach, should not in any way be applied in a negotiation situation. The competitive approach, which is a litigation-like approach, should not be applied in a negotiation environment. In the bid of maintaining the status quo of the relationship of parties to a conflict, the integrative approach serves as the best bargaining strategy. Fisher and Yuri maintains that to adopt the integrative approach, negotiators should do the following. One, separate the people from the problem. What does this mean? It means that interpersonal relationship between conflicting parties and negotiators should be discarded. Uh, if I, as a negotiator, have an interpersonal relationship with any of the parties, I should say it in the first place. I should disclose whatever relationship I have with any of the parties. If any of the parties does not want me to negotiate in that conflict, he will say it there and then. But where he does not say it, I, as a negotiator, should also know that I have a duty to the two parties. And that duty is to be fair to both of them and ensure that whatever interpersonal relationship I have with either of them should be discarded, should not be applied in my assessment or in my strategies for bringing them to an agreeable resolution. Number two, focus on interest, not position. This was what I said when I said positional bargaining should be totally discarded. We should avoid positional bargaining, where a party sits on a particular position and we don't want to make a shift. Remember, we said it's about bargaining. Negotiating is bargaining, and we must be able to bargain. If I give an offer, if a party gives an offer and you're not comfortable with that offer, you can give a counter offer, and it goes on from there. And you keep going from one offer to another, from one bargain point to another bargain point. At the end of the day, we will come to a round table. We come to an agreeable point where parties will agree. Number three, generate a variety of options. There must be options for the parties within which to brainstorm over and develop ideas to meet the need for the competing parties. The negotiators, any negotiator must be able to generate or brainstorm, and because that's the purpose of the presence of the negotiator in that conflict. He must be able to assist parties to bring about options for them to be able to come to an agreement. Number 4, insist that the negotiations be based on some objective standard that is assessed. That is, assess the actions against easily ascertainable standard based on objective criteria. In whatever the negotiator does to bring about an agreeable settlement, an agreeable option for parties, the negotiator must be objective. He cannot afford to be subjective. He must be objective in bringing about an agreeable standard. An agreeable standard. We'll talk about the standard as we move on in the paper. Now, distributive or competitive approach. That is the second approach, which is a win-lose approach. The win-lose approach, which we said should not be adopted in a negotiation environment. This approach is really not great compared to integrative approach. The distributive approach, also known as the win-lose, has been likened to the litigation process because one party wins while the other loses. The resultant effect in the application of this strategy is the inabilities of both parties to win, but rather parties take positions and attempt in the process of negotiating to get the opposing party to agree to such position. The bargainer using this strategy tends to be tough, powerful, and skillful in maximizing his or her principal self-interest. You see, this distributive or competitive approach must be totally avoided in a negotiating environment. Because what it does is that at the end of the day, nobody wins. Because it will not bring about the required peace that we have set to negotiate. Remember, the purpose of negotiating is for us to bring about a peaceful environment for parties. And where we have a position of bargaining, or where we have somebody who insists on his own terms, not willing to concede, then there will be no winner. Either party, nobody wins. And the two of them will be eventually losers. The bargainer using this strategy tends to be tough, powerful, and skillful in maximizing his or her principal self-interest. In such situations, I said there are processes, and the processes include preparation phase, presentation or opening phase, then the bargaining phase, then closing or agreement phase. As you have it on the screen, the preparation phase. Ordinarily, before you go into a negotiation table, you need to prepare. You must know the subject matter. You must know what you are going there to negotiate. You must know the parties. You have a duty to have known the parties, the facts of the issue, then the interest of the two parties you must have known as a negotiator. These are all the things that you need to know. These are all things you need to know before you approach a negotiating table. Ordinarily, preparation is the act of putting or setting things in order for a future purpose. Hence, proper planning and preparation are keys to a successful negotiation. At this stage, proper investigation and gathering of factual information concerning disputing parties, interests, ideas, values, goals, aspirations, etc. This phase simply involves setting out what you hope to achieve and how you hope to achieve it in the negotiation. People tend to argue that Preparation is not important in negotiating. I disagree. However, experts have strongly argued that careful and thorough preparation in negotiating is imperative. It is very, very imperative. Preparation is key in a successful negotiation. Preparation is key. Without preparation, a negotiator will just be there like a figurehead. And you have a room. Even though, even though you cannot influence anything against the will of the parties, you can guide them. And you must know what to guide them about. And these are the things you must have known before you enter into a negotiation table. You need facts, you need figures, and you need to know the parties. You need to have the first the parties you want to negotiate. Yeah. Opening phase. The opening phase. The opening phase. This is the phase where parties, to this negotiation, where they state their case. Both of them are expected to use this opportunity to highlight what they consider to be the main issue for discussion in the negotiation. There is the need to clearly identify and understand the issues for determination so as not to derail the negotiation process. By stating the issues, are able to identify areas of agreement and separate them in negotiation. Summarily, the opening of presentation phase involves the presentation of offers and demands, whether orally or in writing. Now, the opening phase is where parties, state their case, where they converse their interests and make known their demands. It is from this position that there will be counter demand, counter bargaining, offer, counter offer, and so on and so forth. So that is the second stage. The third stage, which is the bargaining phase. In this phase, the skills previously discussed in this paper, that is the distributive and integrative models, come into play. It will not be out of place to consider this phase as the focal point in the negotiation process. This is predicated on the fact that at this phase, the negotiation can proceed to an agreement or to a deadlock. It's a very, very critical stage. It's a very, very critical stage where it's either there is an agreement or there is a deadlock, or it breaks down entirely. Where there is a deadlock at the bargaining phase, the negotiation can break down, and when this happens, immediate action must be taken to prevent the situation from becoming irretrievable. Irretrievable. It can get to the point that it will become irretrievable, where a party walks out of that negotiation table, where a party feels aggrieved and decide, no, it's up. We're up with this, no more. So we must be careful at this very particular stage to be able to take action so that it does not degenerate into a situation where negotiation becomes irretrievable. The bargaining phase offers the parties the opportunity to debate, to rationalize, to scrutinize, and agree on the issues established, to debate, to rationalize, scrutinize, and agree on the issues established at the opening phase. It is the stage where parties persuade the opponent to accept their offers and counter offers. In addition, this stage, communication skills must be utilized effectively. Communication is very key in negotiation. So at this stage, communication must be effectively utilized to bring about a peaceful resolution of issues in dispute. Facilitation of communication between the conflicting parties through the negotiator will yield good negotiation results and limit damage from the breakdown in negotiation. What are the kind of in negotiating? Now, I said What are the kind of communication languages that is expected in a negotiation? Foul languages are not expected in a negotiating table. Parties are barred from using profane languages. Parties are barred from using destructive languages because we are here on a negotiating table to achieve peace, to achieve a resolution. And in achieving a resolution, we are not expected to use languages that provoke or aggravate more issues that could bring about a breakdown in that negotiation. And this is why communication is very key during this bargaining phase. Therefore, the negotiator must ensure that parties refrain from the use of profane languages and destructive um, languages. Now, finally, the closing phase. The closing phase, which otherwise is known as the agreement stage, brings to an end the negotiation process, thereby putting the mutual agreement in a setting that is acceptable to both conflicting parties. At this stage, parties are expected to fine-tune the details of the agreement and ensure that all issues necessary for having an enforceable and feasible agreement have been tackled. It can be succinctly put that there are generally four stages in a negotiation process: the preparation stage, the opening stage, the bargaining stage, and the closing stage. It is a continuous process as a party can stop at any pace and demand for a negotiation below or upon reaching closing phase. You see that we have gotten to the closing stage, or that we have gotten to the final stage of putting down our agreement, does not mean that we are done. Until that agreement is signed and sealed, until parties append their signatures, what it means is that we can start all over again. The negotiation can begin all over again. It can be at a stage we can say, okay, we have not agreed, and we now begin from stage one. You know, probably there will be an adjournment. Okay, we have disagreed, and we cannot come back to the table. Then what do we do? For parties to go and rest their hearts, to go and rest their mind, we will ask that, okay, let's adjourn till tomorrow, or let's adjourn till next week, so that we can start Genuvu. Why do we have to start Genuvu? Because we have identified a point of disagreement that will not allow us to achieve an agreeable agreement. And what we want to achieve is to achieve an agreement that is, yeah, that we have come to the closing stage in a negotiation does not mean parties cannot go back to the opening stage. No, no. And this is why we need a negotiator who can hold on to the negotiation process and ensure that parties comport with the rules of negotiation. If you permit me, Janet, and fellow colleagues of the Institute, please permit me to bring this lecture to a close tonight because of this erratic network. I have just about one topic to close, but I'm not comfortable with this network failure, except you permit me to go on and complete it like that.